I always say you can't out supplement a bad diet, and starting your day with savory and making sure it's really protein forward. We're getting enough protein, right? Trying to get that 100 grams a day. Yes, protein's important, but fiber is just as important. Fiber is one of the best ways we can actually remove cholesterol from our body. Men usually don't have a problem in hitting their protein goals, but what I find is they have more trouble hitting their fiber goals. Don't do the oat milk, is that it's essentially sugar, liquid sugar. If I don't want to start my day and train my taste buds to have something sweet, because that's just going to leave us craving things later on. Hormones is kind of a buzzword right now with everyone, especially in the perimenopause state. Hormones are responders in our body, right? They're the communication messengers. At the end of the day, your body and your hormones need to feel safe. And in order for your body to feel safe and nourished, you have to give it food and you have to give it nutrition. You have to actually eat enough.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. On today's episode, we have the amazing Erin Parekh. She is a holistic and functional dietitian. She shares tons of practical tips around not only how we can eat for our hormone health and for our families, but also how can we support our gut and our lifestyle through what we have in our pantries, practical tips, practical meals. We talked about how we can fuel our bodies postpartum, how men need to be thinking about things like fiber and protein intake, and so much more. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode. This is a guest I have been following for a long time and been wanting to interview for a while. So Erin Parekh is with us. Erin, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Likewise, let's just jump in for someone who's never heard of you and your work, and let's just go through your background and what led you to the wonderful practice that you have today.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm a clinical and integrative nutritionist, primarily focusing on functional medicine for women. I practice with hormone balance, gut health, all of the things that we're hearing so much about daily. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is I've not only gone through it myself, right? Kind of like client zero is me.
Yep.
Um, but also just really noticing like that's what women are struggling with today and knowing that I have the tools and the framework to help them not only as a clinician, but also as a mom and a wife and sort of going through it with them, um, is really my passion for all of this.
That's awesome. And you have a philosophy called the Art of Nourishment. Is that right?
So it's kind of what I've developed over my years of practicing and just so often we think of wellness and health and nutrition as overwhelming, right? And it's just another thing we have to sort of add on to our to-do list. And it just kind of becomes something like, oh, I have to focus on this. But my whole thing is it can be nourishing and it can feel good and we can integrate it into our daily lives, right? So really that simplicity and the beautiful nature of nourishing ourselves as women, because so often we, fill our cups last, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how do we fill our cups first, but
Yeah.
in a way that's not only, journaling and meditation and deep breaths and everything, but the functional side too, and actually using an evidence-based lens and really combining sort of data with intuition together to sort of meet ourselves as moms and women in this crazy current modern world that we're living in.
It is. It's a perfect storm, and in so many ways it works for us, and in a lot of ways it works against us. So,
Mhm.
let's dive into this a little bit more. Why focus so much on hormones? You break down some of the key points that someone should know about food and how it relates to hormone health.
Yeah, so I think, hormones is kind of a buzzword right now with everyone, especially in the perimenopause space.
Yep.
I'm just in my early 40s, and I think, we're just sort of starting to get bombarded with that in a good way. Because I think for
Yeah.
so long we didn't have this information and we were just kind of going about all of our symptoms like blindly, being told like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just part of what you go through. Um, And I think what women don't understand about hormones necessarily is that, we're not going to look at your estrogen, your progesterone, and everything immediately and be like, okay, we're going to go on like HRT or do all of these
Mhm.
different things. But hormones are responders
Yeah.
in our body, right? They're the communication, the messengers. So they're really letting you know when something else is off and they're
Mhm.
affected by things like your sleep and your nutrition and your blood sugar and your gut health, right? All of those things. So I think, I talk about hormones a lot because I think it's where we eventually kind of need to focus the downstream, but it's
Mhm.
all connected, right? At the same time.
So, what are some of the key points someone should know about food as it relates to their hormone health and their diet? Because this is another point of connection that I don't think a lot of women were ever taught, unfortunately.
No, definitely. So I look at food, I think so often too, we're looked, women, you come from like the 90s and it's all
Mhm.
about low fat and restriction and calorie counting. But at the end of the day, I always tell my clients, they come to me with various goals. I'm like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, your body and your hormones need to feel safe.
Mhm.
Right? And in order for your body to feel safe and nourished, right? You have to give it food and you have to give it nutrition. You have to actually eat enough, right? You need to have balanced blood sugar. We forget that insulin's a hormone, right? And when our insulin is balanced and we're going, we're rocking like the steady line instead of the roller
Yep.
coaster, it's gonna affect our thyroid and our cortisol and our estrogen and progesterone and everything else. So I really look at nutrition as that ground zero, not from a restriction standpoint, but again as that like fed and satisfied and nourished point where we're getting enough protein, right? We're trying to get that 100 grams a day or roughly depending on your needs, right? We're eating quality fats and diversity, right, of ingredients too. Like, are we getting enough plants and fiber and all of that? Because that at the end of the day is going to have the most profound effect on how your hormones are functioning. It's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help your stress, right? Which is all again connected.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point around insulin. I mean, this is another part of the conversation. Not only did we not discuss hormone health really much at all until the last few years, so there's this surge of information that's can be overwhelming to try and all kind of make our way through. But we also didn't talk about insulin. I mean, insulin was a
Mhm.
word that maybe was talked about in diabetic circles, and that's kind of it. So let's talk about that a little bit more, and maybe how you help your clients. So when you're looking at insulin, first of all, what is it? Right? You're just talking about how
Mhm.
it affects the hormones, but what is it? And what are three or so things that someone could do every day to just focus on insulin health?
Yeah, and I think, we kind of use them interchangeably insulin, blood sugar,
Yep.
glucose control, right? But
Yep.
they're all essentially the same thing. And it's how our body essentially takes the carbohydrates, the sugar from the foods that we eat, whether it's, honey or a piece of sourdough bread or a candy
Yep.
bar or a sweet potato or anything, and efficiently shuttles that energy into our cells, right?
Mhm.
And insulin basically takes it, opens up the portals, and lets our cells utilize the energy from the carbohydrate source. And when we again don't have balanced blood sugar, right? We're just sort of eating naked carbs, right? Is a
Yep.
terminology we hear often where we're just not pairing it with a protein or a fat, then that's going to cause a more of a glucose spike,
Yep.
right? An insulin increase. And then that's going to give us sort of that wired or tired, jittery afternoon crashes, everything, which then again affects our hormones. So I think what were you saying? Three things that we should do daily
Yeah.
to
How
sort
should
of
someone?
manage
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and especially for so many listeners are just hearing this stuff for the first time, right? So it's the first time
Mhm.
that they've heard about blood sugar and insulin, and they, why should they care? And they're dealing with a lot of these symptoms, but it's also just I love to give like the practical advice, like, okay, here's where to start, right? So here's, from a dietitian perspective, here are the kind of
Mhm.
handful of things that I would just make sure that you're doing every day.
So starting your day savory, right?
Mhm.
Trying to do like a nice breakfast with eggs and like a sausage, or even just like you could do like a little bit of a sourdough toast or Ezekiel bread. I
Yep.
love it because it's high in fiber and protein
Yep.
content. But really thinking like, I don't want to start my day and train my taste buds to have something sweet
Hmm.
because that's just going to leave us craving things later on in the day. We're kind of priming our body for always looking for that sugar. So
Yeah.
then starting your day with savory and making sure it's really protein forward,
Yep.
right? A lot of research shows that when we do a lower carb, not no carb, but a lower carb, higher protein, higher fat breakfast,
Yep.
it's really just going to support us throughout the day, right? It's
Mhm.
giving us that stable foundation and baseline. So I am always like, that's like rule number one when you're
Yeah.
working with me. You're going to eat breakfast and you're going to eat protein. And then if you do, drink coffee, like love my coffee, but like
Yeah.
don't do the oat milk,
Yep.
right? I prefer like an almond milk or
Yeah.
even a grass-fed half and half.
Yep.
That's what I personally do, is really great, again, to just try to not spike that blood sugar first thing in the morning.
Why no oat milk? For those oat milk lovers, this has
I
become
know.
crazy fad. Why no oat milk?
So I'm not a fan of oat milk for various reasons, but one of the biggest ones is that it's essentially sugar, right? Liquid sugar. If you look at the nutrition ingredients on it, you'll see like it's probably like 8 grams. I don't know for sure, but you're starting your day essentially with liquid sugar before you're putting anything else in your body. You're coming off of an overnight fast, you haven't had any food in your body, and you're literally just giving it that jolt, which is then going to make you crave sugar the rest of the day.
Yeah, and it's become I when it first came out, definitely had, oat milk in my coffees and everything else until I learned, and I was like, "Oh my goodness gracious,"
Hmm.
because it really has been messaged and marketed as like this plant, based kind of healthy alternative to milk. And frankly, I think what you said is the healthiest thing from a cleanliness perspective is just get some really good organic half and half or A2 milk and
Yeah,
do
I
that.
think
So
we're kind of coming full circle a bit
I
with the
hope
dairy conversation.
I hope. It's kind of
I
crazy,
was guilty,
but
guilty for
so
the oat
so
milk
was I.
too.
So was I. And part of it, though, I will say, part of it was the quality of the dairy, especially in the US,
Mhm.
by and large isn't good, right? So I, pulled back and stopped drinking dairy and eating much dairy because the quality, it was hurting my stomach. Now that we have better quality, there's a lot better quality on the market, and different options. You pay a little bit more,
Mhm.
but my philosophy is like pay a little bit more and use it a little bit less, right? So you're not pounding it, you're using it, a little bit less frequently, but you're paying for the quality. So that's my philosophy with any dairy, especially with kids. It's like get the raw cheddar cheese, the organic cheddar, like the good cheese, and totally
Yeah,
fine. And it doesn't hurt them. But yeah, I think that's all of that is so interesting. The other thing that you mentioned here, and I think this is important with breakfast because it is kind of a mindset of how to start the day. You mentioned fiber. And we have been doing a lot of research with fiber. We have fiber products that are out. But fiber is so interesting because, I say this often, but even as someone who owns and operates a dietary supplement company, fiber is something you cannot supplement your way out of. You can't supplement your way out of
hmm
anything, right? But you certainly can't with fiber. And, and what I mean by that is even the best fiber products on the market might have 6 to 8 10 grams of fiber. That's a lot for a day. You
hmm
need 3 times that. And I would never recommend to anyone that you take a supplement with 20 or 30 grams of fiber a day. It's way too much. It will be very, very painful for anyone.
Yeah.
So it's a phenomenon and it's a breakdown, obviously, in our food system of not getting the fiber. But why do you think fiber has been so overlooked within specifically our generation?
I think we're always hyper focused on one thing, right?
Yeah.
If you look now, it's like the protein, right? How much protein are you getting? How much cottage cheese can you eat in a day, right? And
Yeah.
before that, I think it was focused on fat. And
Mm,
now we're finally learning, as you know, so much about our gut health and our microbiome, and that it needs not only fiber, but right. I mean, like inulin and all the things that you can get from supplements can be really wonderful. And I think, again, some like supplements can be a good thing to supplement
yep.
with, but I always say you can't out supplement a bad diet, right?
Nope.
So
Never.
what are you getting from your food? And not only just grams of fiber, but we don't realize that our gut also needs polyphenols, right?
Mhm.
Too. Akkermansia, for example, loves red foods, right? So are you getting your pomegranates and your berries and your beets and all these different things? Are we feeding them through different types of fiber, through resistant starch, right? That's what
Yep.
we need. And you can only get that through food and through fiber, right? And
Yep.
even though we don't digest fiber, our gut bugs love fiber. So
Yeah.
I'm always telling my clients, like, yes, protein's important, but fiber is just as important. And not only fiber, but the diversity of fiber that you're getting too.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Um, in your work, you have used this term, which I really like, which is this idea of forever ingredients. So, what are forever ingredients? How do they make approaching kind of hormone-friendly meals so simple?
Yeah, so I have always loved cooking, and before I even got into, functional nutrition and getting my license and everything, I had a food blog in my
Yeah,
20s,
that's
and I
awesome.
love cooking. Like, to me, it's just I always get like sad when I have clients who they don't love cooking, and I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
like I'm going to teach you to love cooking, right?
Yeah.
As like part of it, and get you in the kitchen, because I think there's just so beneficial on so many levels. And part of that is when you have sort of an arsenal of
Mhm.
ingredients in your house that you can just consistently rely on, it makes feeding you and your family um, so much easier. And I think that's at the end of the day what we're looking for. It helps prevent like decision fatigue, because it's like,
Yep.
okay, I have all of these base things that I can just, I know how to put these 3 meals together. I always have these things. So, olive oil, good salts, vinegars, cans
Yep.
of chickpeas, pastas, maybe like a ferment or two, like
Yep.
sauerkraut, even like good things like frozen brown rice, like
Yeah.
organic brown rice that you can get. I always have packets of ground beef in my freezer,
Mhm.
right? Those are super easy to defrost.
Yep.
So I think really, and you kind of look at your needs and your family's preferences and create your own little list of forever ingredients. But I really look at like real whole foods, not only um, from that perspective, but like, adding flavor and things
Yeah.
too, I think, because that's what keeps meals interesting. And then when you bring in those whole food ingredients, you're getting variety and you're sort of naturally supporting your gut and your hormones at the same time.
Yeah, and so much of the breakdown, I think, of what we're seeing in all of these symptoms, really, and frankly, the health struggles that so many Americans and people all over the world are going through is because they're not cooking. It's
Mhm.
a breakdown of how we've prioritized our time and how we've deprioritized time in the kitchen and cooking. It's
Yeah.
and it's, and it's something that again you can't supplement your way out of. You can't, at the end of the day, meal delivery way you're out of your way out of. It's something that you really do need to at one point or another address, and especially for families. Some of the biggest issues that we hear from different consumers and people that are really struggling right now, really around fatigue and high cortisol.
Hmm.
Those are two things we hear a lot about. So fatigue is just the chronic fatigue, waking up tired, not even just the afternoon crash, but just kind of tired all day. And then also high cortisol levels. And something that's kind of, again, a phenomenon and something we haven't seen a lot of in the past. How do you go about looking at the root causes of what someone may be feeling, right? So a client that comes to you,
Hmm.
they may be feeling, and if it can be healed through diet and food.
Yeah, definitely. So if someone comes to me telling me like I just like have issues waking up in the morning, like no energy throughout the day, or maybe I'm like have no energy and then all of a sudden I'm like crazy, like have this like really big burst of energy, but like at the wrong time during the day. I'm like, well, first let's kind of look at your thyroid, right?
Mhm.
What's going on with that? Because our thyroid is essentially our metabolism and energy.
Yep.
And then also, again, let's look at your cortisol curve, which we can do through something from like a Dutch test.
Yep.
A Dutch hormone panel, right? We can look and see where your curve is. If you have a cortisol spike in the morning, I have a number of clients who will at like 3, 4 p.m., you'll see it like
Mm.
go up. And I'm like, oh, it's school pickup time. It's like when all of that's
Interesting.
happening.
Yep.
So I'll see that. I'll see, women going through perimenopause, like, late 40s, early 50s, and you'll see the spike up, like at 9 o'clock at night whenever they do
Mm.
that. And that's like, okay, I'm exhausted, but then I'm getting that spike in, before bed. And it's like you get that issues with sleep. And then I think something that, and we can get to the nutrition in a minute, but we
Yeah.
always talk about high cortisol, but I
Yeah.
see a lot of low cortisol too,
Mm. And
which
what
you
do you
sort
think
of,
is causing that?
a lot of times is, you may have had high cortisol for a long time, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you just completely tank and burn
Mm.
out. I see it a lot.
Adrenal fatigue.
Yeah, and I don't know if we necessarily use the term adrenal fatigue
Yeah.
anymore, because your adrenals don't necessarily like tire out; they
Right.
just sort of dysfunction,
Yeah.
right? There's sort of a miscommunication with everything, and like wires get crossed, and
Yep.
um, we don't have the right, again, inputs for
Mhm.
everything. And I personally dealt with low cortisol when
Interesting.
I was postpartum. So I did
Interesting.
my own Dutch test, and I was like, oh, we were like really low. And I think it's just because we're just constantly going, going, going. And for so
Yeah.
long, our body then is just like, we're just not doing this anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like, you got to rest, girl. And I
Yeah.
think so that's what we'll see too. Not even necessarily high cortisol, but we'll see a lot of low cortisol too.
That's very interesting. What we know that cortisol issues are connected with the gut. How can we look at food as a resource and a tool for cortisol, for fatigue, these issues that, again, we're just seeing kind of on the rise like crazy?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think we have to go back and remember that literally everything, our hormones are made from the food that we eat,
Hmm.
right? So, are we giving us the building blocks that we need, right?
Yeah.
Even if you have high cortisol and you're producing too much, like you still need to give your body the ingredients,
Yep.
right? To utilize everything efficiently, right? Because the
Mhm.
high cortisol is still reacting to something else that's an imbalance in your body
Yeah.
or, from outside stimuli. So what can we do again to nourish our bodies? And it's so basic. I feel like it's like eat your protein, eat
Yeah.
your grass-fed meats, eat your pasture-raised chicken, grass-fed dairy, get your fiber, your greens, the rainbow. Um, and I think fats are really important too when you're dealing with things like thyroid or low cortisol or anything like that, because our steroid hormones like are made through from fats, right? Cholesterol. So we do need to have sort of a higher percentage diet. I personally noticed when I started integrating more animal
Mhm.
proteins that I started to feel better,
Yep.
right? Not like just protein powders, but like
Yep.
actual animal meats, because they have all the B vitamins and the zinc and
Yep.
everything else that we need too. Um, so again, it sounds so simple, but I think just real good, high quality whole foods, and then again, eating enough.
Yeah.
Because when your body doesn't feel safe, right? We think dieting and over exercising and everything is a stressor. And if we're already so stressed and our
Yeah.
cortisol is high, right? Or our thyroid is sluggish, and that could be why we're feeling that chronic fatigue, then if we're just adding on another stressor because we're trying to control and restrict, then it's not going to help our body, right? So I think eating
Yeah.
enough is huge.
It's such a good point. I've noticed the exact same thing, and I think most people would agree. Switching to, high quality animal proteins has been just game changer. And you mentioned like ground beef. I mean, I have a toddler, she loves it, but like high
Mhm.
quality ground beef, it takes 5 minutes to make in a cast iron pan. It's very
Yeah.
easy. You literally, I mean, it's so simple. But I think you're completely right that the our culture has been such a outsource these types of things, or there's a quick fix for everything, there's a fast food meal for everything, and you cannot get the same nutritional value. You will not get the same nutritional value. When it comes to protein, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Are there problems with the highly accessible whey protein that most people are using as kind of the main source of protein?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a time and a place for everything,
Mhm.
right? And I supplement with protein powders.
Mhm.
If it's something like feel like I haven't had enough for the day or
Yep.
something and I'm like a little snacky or just kind of like, why am I craving something? I'm like, you know what? I didn't
Yep.
have enough protein. Like, shoot, I don't have anything like prepped. Let me make like
Yep.
a smoothie or something with like, protein powder mixed in.
Yep.
Great, easy. I think if you have goals for like body recomposition, right? A good high quality protein powder can be a great way to add in nutrition post workout. I think for someone
Mhm.
who's pregnant,
Yep.
right? And you may not have an appetite, like certain times, like meats can just sort of be not appealing.
Yep.
Protein powder can be a great thing to add in. Collagen,
Yeah.
I add collagen to my coffee daily. I just think it's a good way to kind of give yourself a boost.
Yep.
Um, but I think the obsession with protein powders, again, I think they serve a purpose and I'll use them and I'll have my clients use them, especially for women who don't have time to like have a sit down and make their lunch. I'm like, okay, great, let's get you a high quality protein powder. We can kind of figure out how to integrate that right into your day.
Yep.
um People who are working on gut health, right? Again, like protein powder can be an easy way to just like quickly absorb the protein, right? Because I think that's another thing too, like we not only have to eat, this is like a whole other tangent probably, but um, we have this obsession with protein, but it's like, okay, we eat all this protein, but is our gut health
Yeah.
like healthy enough to
Yeah.
actually absorb the protein and the amino
Right.
acids, right, from it? So I think, again, kind of a long-winded answer to
Yeah,
your
and that's
question.
really that's really kind of what I was getting at too, is kind of the integrity of gut health, and frankly, the reality is the quality of the protein powder by and large
Hmm.
this is a very general statement, but the quality of most of what's being sold and what's out there is not great, right? So you have poor gut health mixed with, hey, I need, 150, 200 grams of protein. I'm just going to take it all in the
Mhm.
format. And so we have to be cautious of that. I mean, there's, whey, obviously, whey protein, that's the big one. There's plant-based proteins, and there's bone broth based proteins as well. Is there a
Mhm.
preference of what you normally recommend for your clients if they do want to add in for a smoothie or for something that's kind of an easier protein drink?
Yeah, generally, I prefer sort of the bovine base, so not
Yep.
necessarily whey, but just
Yep.
like bovine, grass-fed protein powders. I find they dissolve the best, right? So that you don't get that sort of like gritty taste. And I
Yeah.
find they generally are cleaner if, again, you source it correctly. So if it's like a grass-fed, bovine based protein, that's what I prefer. And if you're vegan, I don't really have an issue with
Yeah.
um, plant-based proteins. But again, I think the quality of the protein matters, and you also have to look at everything else they're putting into
Yeah.
the protein powder, right? It's not even
Right.
necessarily the protein, it's everything else.
Yeah.
And I swear it's the number one question clients ask me. It's like, "What protein powder should I use?"
Really?
Right? It's like such the buzz. I'm
Yeah.
like, I need like a repeat button. Like,
Yeah.
this is my
That's so
answer.
interesting. But it speaks to, again, the protein craze, right? And so I think fiber's picking up. It's picking up at least it's carrying its weight in the conversation a little bit more.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting. I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit because you have children, right? And
Yes.
you've been through, and you were just mentioning postpartum and low cortisol. And I think it's so interesting because just for women and speaking to, pregnancy and postpartum and recovery from a diet perspective, I mean, there's so much information and so many opinions, right? But I just think the most important thing, as with any big switch in hormones, right? Pregnancy and obviously postpartum is a massive switch, a massive change in hormones so quickly. But then the same thing obviously can be drawn to menopause and these other times of our lives. um, the diet has to come first, right? It has to be
Mhm.
first, has to be kind of the basis of which we build everything else from, or nothing else will really work. So would love to hear kind of what you did personally, and then some of your advice maybe for kind of healthy postpartum recovery, and just these kind of, again, these core areas of massive hormone shift, these 4 seasons of massive hormone shift. What if you have any recommendations or advice there?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, me postpartum, I have one child, she's
Yeah.
4 and just turned 4. And, postpartum, I think for me, I didn't realize like how depleted you actually
Yeah.
become, right? From just everything, like literally growing the child and then, breastfeeding, if you're able to, it's
Yeah.
just a lot on the body. And even
Yeah.
as someone who, has a master's degree in nutrition, it's to do it yourself is it's really hard,
Yeah.
right? To just make sure that you're giving not only this little human that you've created everything that they need, but
Yeah.
everything that you need um, too. And I think some of the biggest things that I personally focused on was, right, getting enough iron rich foods because
Yep.
you're so depleted after that. Plenty of fats,
Yep.
right, to restore. Again, if you're planning on, would like to breastfeed, right, you need a lot of healthy fats for that too. Um, and then just warming cooked foods too,
Mhm.
just like bone broth and kind of going into that sort of like Ayurvedic, just like
Yeah.
warming, nurturing, like cooked foods because your digestion is all over the place too,
Mhm.
right? Your gut
Yeah.
health, like completely, your organs are moving back to
Yeah.
where they need to be. You may be a little backed up,
Yep.
right? Too.
Yep.
And I think kind of thinking just cooked foods like soups, stews. I remember my mom made me like a big, like double batch of like a beef stew that was just the best
So
thing
good.
ever,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then also kind of going in and applying some of these things we've talked about. The other question I have is with, we've got a 4-year-old, right? So a lot of
Hmm.
parents, a lot of moms that listen to this, you've got a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old. It's hard to get them to eat. And now your kind of brain is loaded up with all this information of what you should be eating and all of these things. It's so critical that we develop the baby's palate and then the toddler's palate and then the child's palate. How have you gone about diet, nutrition for your child through toddlerhood and now as a 4-year-old?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not perfect
Yeah.
at all. And I think so much of what we can do as parents is to have grace and to
Yeah.
just be consistent,
Yep.
right? I think is the biggest key. Like when she was little, we did, baby led
Amazing.
weaning for the most part. I'm like your avocado and your hemp seeds and
Yeah.
like all of your like little finger foods and like smush it and taste like the sardines and get that like flavor in your palate, right? And then inevitably they kind of hit the picky eater phase, which is so difficult,
Yeah.
right? Especially as someone I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You just have the mac and cheese and the chicken fingers and everything. And what I think has worked the best, and now that she's 4, she's kind of getting out of that phase a bit, there's just consistency,
Mhm.
right? It's like you just keep offering the foods. If, you might offer like one like safe food, they're going to eat, but then I'm also putting the green beans or the avocado, right? Or something next to it. And lo and behold, like one night she'll like pound all of the green beans and eat them
Mhm.
off of my plate too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I won,
Yeah.
like we're doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's just that exposure and modeling is so
Yeah.
important
That's
too,
awesome.
because they'll see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to go back through kind of some of the other ingredients and foods that are becoming more and more popular. So, speaking of things like bone broth, something
Mhm.
else that's become kind of a fad in the world of diet has been beef tallow. So, everyone's been talking about beef tallow.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an opinion of this, but why is that been considered healthier than other oils or butters when it comes to cooking?
So I think it's twofold. Well, kind of they go hand in hand. Right? There's been this talk about seed oils in our
Yep.
food, right? And the fact that we don't want all these omega 6s because they're inflammatory, right? From canola oils, vegetable oils, things that you'll often get from more like packaged processed foods or when you're
Mhm.
dining out at restaurants, things like that. Um, but even in your own home, you've known there's sort of been a shift from, cooking with vegetable oil to like an avocado oil or something of that nature. And then I think beef tallow has really come around because it's a saturated fat. It's
Yep.
has a high smoke point, which means it's not going to go rancid when you're
Yep.
cooking with it. And it's just kind of an alternative to that. And we're sort of, again, it's that full circle, moment. We like demonize these things for so long. And now we're
Yeah.
realizing, actually, you know what? Like what our ancestors and grandparents were eating was actually like probably what we should have been doing all along.
Yep.
And I like it. I think it has a great flavor too. We actually
Yeah.
just roasted some cauliflower with beef tallow last night. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy, and again, it's like going back to the kids and the whole family, it's tasty. Like, it's easy to get
mhm.
everyone to eat these things because they do frankly taste better. In your nourishment philosophy, there's 8 pillars, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mhm.
So putting kind of the essentials simply, what are the primary pillars of health that any client, anyone should consider when they're approaching, their diet?
Yeah, definitely. So I have my essential 8, which is part of my
Yep.
Nourish to Thrive method. And it's really what you look for and try to do in your daily, weekly life, right? Which I think nutrition is the foundation, eating for balance, blood sugar balance, hormone balance, all of that. Gut health, right? I think is beyond important, as you know, too. And I think the more I work with clients, I like, they come in for hormones and then I'm like, and let's talk about gut health too. It may not be as sexy, but it's just as
Yep.
important. Managing your stress, creating calm, sleeping. I always say sleep smarter, not necessarily like deeper or more, because as
Mhm.
moms, right, sometimes it's just not possible. But how can
Mhm.
you sort of sleep a bit smarter with that? Um, for me, I have to move daily in some capacity. And I always talk about it as movement versus exercise. Because I think
Mhm.
sometimes like I've had an interesting relationship with exercise throughout my 20s and 30s and everything. And I just think having something you enjoy
Yeah.
um, is important. And like
Mhm.
looking at strength training and things like that too, because we know the science behind it, but just daily movement.
Yep.
And then I always talk about cleaning house too, which is your actual house, like,
Yeah.
toxins, like switching up like water, not doing plastics, but then also your liver, right? Your
Yep.
internal house.
Yep.
And then I think mindset and personalization are really big too.
Let's go back to the sleep smarter, because I think this is
Mhm.
the way that you frame this is interesting. What does that mean?
Yeah, so to me, I think it's looking at, right, a little like, again, it's going back to the art of nourishment and kind of what we know from lived experience, but then also through science.
Yeah.
So I always tell, I'll have clients and a lot of my moms will do like the revenge scrolling until like
Yep.
11 p.m. at
Yep.
night, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
their time. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you got to put the phone away and like go
Yeah.
to bed by like 9:30. Because if we sleep, like let's say we get 6 hours of sleep
Yep.
and we're sleeping from midnight to 6 a.m., or we're sleeping from like 10 to let's say like 4:30, right?
Mm.
Maybe not the perfect example, but if we go to bed earlier, we're actually going to have a better, more restful sleep than if we get the
Mm.
same hours of sleep and we go to bed later.
Wow. It's interesting. There's also just a
Mhm.
practicality around what are you actually doing between 8, 9, and midnight? And for
Mhm.
almost everyone, you're so drained by that point. I mean, especially if you do have kids and you're working or you just have a busy day. But if you have kids, I mean, there's not much. I mean, sometimes there is a necessity. I mean, I live and breathe this where I have to work during that time. So it's rare. I try really not to. But there's that, right? So if you're working or something, okay, not ideal, but it is what it is. As far as movement is concerned, also a very good point. And I think that kind of the headliner has, been find something that works for you, be really consistent with movement. And then as you can, and for women that hadn't had exposure to this, try and add in some sort of weight training, right? But what are
Yeah.
some kind of day one easy movement tips for a busy mom or a woman who maybe doesn't spend a lot of time moving and is trying to, but it's really hard to get going with? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think, we hear it a lot, but step count, right? Even just like moving more,
Yep.
getting up and going to the bathroom more. I'll tell my clients, to get up and just do like some squats
Yep.
and like just do some air squats,
Yep.
right? Get up from your desk and just like every hour or something, you're like, just do like 20, like up and down calf raises, like something to just
Yep.
get your body moving. Cause it's, yes, it's for, muscle tone and all of that. But it's also, again, going back to the insulin conversation, like our
Yeah.
muscles are glucose sinks, like they
Yeah.
will help to balance your blood sugar and keep all of that stable. So my biggest thing is like get your step count in, maybe throw on a weighted vest if you want to go that route because they are beneficial.
Yeah.
Um and just again do some like body weight exercises, squats and things like that. And then as you feel more comfortable, then you can work on adding, more weight training or, flexibility, stability, things like that.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot throughout this conversation about women, which is great. That's our core demographic, and we, are, building this beautiful community. So a lot of discussion around women, but also growing discussion around men. So is there a big difference that you see in the functional nutrition between men and women, and what they're both kind of struggling with right now when you look at your client list, and what are some of their main concerns?
I think, men are, really concerned. They come to me about sort of longevity and aging.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big buzzword for them. And then, we look at nutritionally, men usually don't have a problem hitting their protein goals, but what I
Yeah.
find is they have more trouble hitting their fiber goals,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's easy to eat the meat and the steak and that sort of thing, but I'm like, where's our vegetables and
Yeah.
our nutrients and our colors and right, all of those sorts of things too, right? Because we want to
Yeah.
protect your gut health, your heart health
Yep.
is a big one. A lot of men come to me for cholesterol,
Mhm.
right? High blood pressure. And we don't realize that fiber is one of the best ways we can actually remove cholesterol from our body is, by pooping it out,
Yep.
basically. So again, like I think fiber is a big thing that men are missing from their nutrition, right? They're so focused on the protein and the bodybuilding and the muscles. But again, like when we talk about longevity, because that's the buzzword they're sort of after, where
Yep.
women I feel like are more like hormones is their buzzword.
Yep.
Um, but fiber works for both. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's such a good point. What most, men don't realize is they realize, later in their lives usually that there's high cholesterol and they've got to focus on it. And so what do you do about it? But cholesterol and cholesterol metabolism is actually intricately connected to the gut microbiome. And
Hmm.
gut is responsible for cholesterol metabolism and processing that cholesterol. So very, I would say newer, but definitely under discussed aspect of men's health. The other one is colon health, right? And colon health,
Hmm.
that's connected to the gut. So great mention there, and always looking out for the men. What, just on the fiber piece, now that we've talked about that for men and for women, what is your perspective on how much fiber a man should be getting and a woman should be getting per day?
Yeah, usually, my range is 35 to 50 grams,
Yep.
kind of interchangeably. I don't necessarily say like, men generally have a higher need, but in general, if either are hitting 35 to 50, you should be good to go.
Awesome. And then
Mhm.
as far as just like typical diet that's optimized for fiber, what does that look like if someone's just looking for, okay, give me a few things that I can add to my diet that are high in fiber, that are easy to add to my diet? What
Yeah.
would some of those best foods be from your perspective?
So I think so often we think I'm going to have a salad and that's going to be really
Yeah.
high in fiber. But lettuce is actually relatively lower in fiber. So we kind of have to think what else can we add to it? Avocados are actually quite high in
Mhm.
fiber. Raspberries, I love. Blackberries, chia seeds, flax meal. Um, what else? Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, are also, some of my favorites. And then we also have to think about, even resistant starches like sweet potatoes, um, chickpeas, right? Beans,
Yeah.
legumes, lentils are amazing source of
Yeah.
fiber. So I think kind of looking at those sources versus just like, a big leafy green salad.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Well, cool. As we wrap it up here, a couple of other questions. Just would love to hear from your perspective. The kind of, I want to say buzzwords, but the main thing that so many people are looking for are these hormone friendly kind of easy meals to make. I think that's kind of just
Mhm.
always be something. So we've got a lot of women right now that have been educated on the importance of hormone health, know that they have hormone imbalance, are really trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I go about my day from here on out? So if you've got just some easy kind of top of mind meals that women could put together, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, easy stuff for
Yeah.
hormone friendly, and just, I would also say, kind of stress free, right? Easy stuff that they
Mhm.
could do. What are some of your tops that come to mind?
Yeah, so my go-to breakfast is usually a couple of hard-boiled eggs. I'll either make
Mhm.
them or just get the pre-done
Yep.
organic ones from the store with like some Greek yogurt and again like
Mhm.
raspberries, flax seeds for your
Mhm.
fiber. Quick, easy morning. You can just like plop the yogurt in a bowl, grab your eggs out the door. For lunches, a lot of times I'll just do like whatever I have left over from dinner, like some rotisserie chicken with like some avocado. Again, we're thinking protein, healthy fats, and then I'll kind of throw whatever veggies I have with that. And then for dinner, like I love last night, I did like a ground beef bowl
Yeah.
with roasted sweet potato, some like cilantro or arugula I had, and then some pickled onions like from the fridge that I got. So I think it's like pretty basic and simple. And that tallow roasted cauliflower
Yeah.
too that I did. Right. But I don't think, a lot of times we think we have to make all these recipes, but
Yeah.
I really love just having components ready, throw it in a bowl. Um, that's really the easiest.
Recipe wise, you have a Substack, right, with your recipes?
Mhm.
Awesome.
I
Do you have
do.
do you
Yep.
have a favorite recipe, or can you just tell the audience where they can find your recipes if they're looking for these types of easy meals?
Yeah, so I have some recipes on my website, which is just
Awesome.
erinparekh.com. And then my Substack is the Art of Nourishment. You
Awesome.
can just search my name on there too. And there are recipes. And every Sunday, I'll give you sort of like a meal plan with 3 or 4 different recipes and things I'm prepping for the week. A lot of different wellness tidbits in there too.
Great. And just in closing, I would just say, what's one thing? Obviously, you've got a 4-year-old daughter, so I'm sure you think about this like I do, but what's one thing through kind of the lens of your work that you're inspired by, that you're hopeful about when it comes to the future and where we're heading with nutrition, gut health, hormone health? Kind of what is your outlook right now as we head into the final months of 2025 and into 2026?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is really looking into I feel like hopefully we're simplifying things a
Yeah.
bit, right? That's really just what I want. I want to just, we don't need to be so overwhelmed, like getting back to basics and
Yeah.
using evidence and science to not make it more complicated, but to make it easier for all of us, I think at the end of the day.
That's a great response. And I think that is what's happening. We're going back to the way that we were created to eat and live, which is
Mhm.
great. Where can everyone find your work? Where can they follow along with your content and interact with you?
Yep. So erinparekh.com is my website. You can follow me on Instagram at erinparekh_. And then my Substack is Erin Parekh, The Art of Nourishment.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gut Check podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think, like the episode, and share it with friends and family who may also benefit from learning about these important and educational health and wellness topics. You can find the Gut Check podcast on YouTube, also on Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. The Gut Check podcast is brought to you by our team at Daily Nori. Daily Nori makes probiotic and prebiotic solutions accessible to all because good health starts with gut health. To learn more about Daily Nori, please go to www.dailynori.com. Thank you.